The man who chose exile. The desert world of Proxima B7 was a place where silence ruled. The wind moved across endless dunes, carrying sand that scratched against stone walls. Inside those walls lived Jack Harmon, a man who had walked away from Earth, away from war, away from people. Jack had been here for 15 years. 15 long years since he left the military, since he turned his back on politics and human settlements. He had chosen exile, and for a long time, he believed it was the only way to survive his own mind. Every morning was the same. He woke before the twin suns rose, stretched his tired but strong body, and checked the systems that kept him alive. Water filters, solar panels, perimeter alarms, and food supplies were his daily companions. His hands were rough from endless repairs, his muscles shaped by labor and survival. The compound was more than a home. It was a fortress, a prison, and a kingdom where he ruled alone. He called it a ranch, though there were no cattle, no horses, no signs of life except small desert plants he sometimes tried to grow. Jack lived on protein rations, hydroponic greens, and bitter coffee he guarded like treasure. There were no voices to disturb him, no neighbors within 300 miles, only the desert and the memory of things he wanted to forget. At 52, Jack looked older than his years. The alien sun had burned his skin. The wind had carved deep lines in his face. His blue eyes carried weight, the look of a man who had seen too much and then chosen to see nothing at all. Isolation had become his medicine, his shield against the ghost of the past. Sometimes he walked to the edge of the compound and stared at the horizon. The suns rose slowly, painting the dunes in fire and shadow. It was a harsh kind of beauty, the kind that reminded him why he stayed here, far from anyone who could drag him back into war. He told himself he preferred the silence. Though at night the silence often spoke louder than words, Jack's past followed him like a shadow. He had been a soldier, not just any soldier, but one trusted with missions that governments never spoke about. He had seen friends die, civilians caught in fire, leaders trading lives for power. When he tried to speak the truth, he was silenced. When he tried to stay loyal, he was betrayed. So he ran. Proxima B7 offered him distance. It was not Earth, not Mars, not the busy colonies where humans lived. Together, it was barren and dangerous, but it was simple. Jack could wake each day knowing the only life he had to protect was his own. The loneliness was heavy, but it was also clean. No politics, no orders, no lies. He wore his leather jacket even in the heat, a relic from Earth, as if the weight of it kept him grounded. The smell of old leather mixed with desert dust reminded him of a world he once belonged to. There were days he almost forgot what it meant to speak. His voice sounded strange when he muttered to himself. Sometimes he would laugh at his own dry jokes, only to fall silent again. In those moments, the compound felt less like a home and more like a tomb. Jack knew the risks of this planet. Sandstorms that could strip metal bare, syndicate patrols from the alien civil war, strange creatures in the desert night. But none of them had reached him. For 15 years, his alarm never rang. The gates never opened and his solitude stayed unbroken. He told himself that was enough. He told himself he was free. But in the quiet hours before dawn, when dreams clung to him like mist, Jack sometimes wondered if he had really escaped, or if he had only built stronger walls around his prison. And then, on a morning like any other, Jack sat with a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. The bitterness filled his mouth. The warmth spread through his chest. It was the one human comfort he never gave up. He stared at the suns climbing into the sky and whispered his old joke again. Another day in paradise. But deep inside, he felt something stir, a faint unease he could not name. It was as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Waiting. Jack did not yet know that his exile was almost over, that his quiet, controlled life was about to shatter, and that 11 shadows were already walking across the desert toward his gate. The gate of 11 shadows. The morning had begun like every other morning on Proxima B7. Jack had checked his systems, walked the perimeter, and sat with his coffee. 15 years without a single visitor, 15 years without a single alarm. But today the silence broke. The shrill cry of the perimeter alarm split the air. The sound was sharp and unnatural, echoing through the compound like a scream. Jack froze, his hand still gripping his cup, hot liquid spilling onto the floor. For a moment he thought it must be a malfunction, some sensor damaged by the desert storm from last night. But deep in his bones, Jack knew this was different. His voice, rough from disuse, cracked the silence. Computer, display feed. The screen flickered to life, grainy at first, then clear enough to show the main gate. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Standing there, framed by wind and blowing sand, were 11 figures. Tall, slim, wrapped in torn uniforms, their outlines trembling under the storm. They were female, that much was certain, and not human. Their skin shimmered faintly violet beneath, the torn cloth as though glowing from within. Strange patterns moved across their skin like living tattoos, shifting with each breath. White hair whipped wildly around faces marked with blue eyes so sharp they seemed to pierce the camera itself. Jack whispered without meaning to, "What the hell?" He had not seen a living Proxian this close in over a decade, and never like this. They looked like survivors dragged from the edge of death, yet there was something regal, something unbroken in the way they stood, huddled together, defiant against the storm. One of them stepped forward. Her eyes found the lens directly as, though she could see Jack through the glass and steel, Jack's stomach twisted violently. He knew that face. He had seen it before, not in life but in his dreams, dreams that haunted him for months, dreams he had blamed on isolation and the thin oxygen of this planet. But here she was, real, breathing, alive. Her lips moved, though he could not hear. She pressed her hands against the gate, her blue eyes glowing with desperation and certainty. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. It was impossible, and yet it was happening. The woman from his dreams was standing at his door. Instinct pulled him backward. His soldier reflexes screamed, "Trap!" Jack rushed to the wall mount and snatched his pulse rifle. The weapon hummed to life, its old power core glowing faintly. He had not fired it in 15 years, but muscle memory returned instantly. He moved through the compound with steady steps, his boots crunching against the floor. Every nerve on edge, every breath shallow. As he reached the gate chamber, the storm's roar became louder, shaking the reinforced glass. Through the viewport, he saw them more clearly. Their uniforms carried insignia unfamiliar even to him. Not syndicate, not alliance, not any force he recognized. They carried no weapons, at least none visible. But Jack had seen too much war to believe appearances. The one in front, the woman from his dreams, stepped closer. Her voice came through the speaker system, distorted but clear enough. "Please, human man, we have nowhere else to go." Jack's hand hovered near the gate release. Every instinct told him to deny her, to turn them away, to survive alone as he always had. But her words, her eyes, her face, things he thought belonged only to his nightmares, dragged him forward. He barked through the microphone, "Who are you, and how did you find me?" The woman placed both hands flat against the gate, her eyes locked to his. "I am Liana, last of the 7th Battalion of the Northern Alliance." Her voice dropped lower, filled with weight. "Our ship crashed, 10 miles south. The Syndicate patrols are hunting us. We will not survive the night." Jack's jaw tightened. The Syndicate, the endless war he had tried so hard to escape. It was at his doorstep now in the shape of 11 desperate women. He could turn them away and keep his fortress safe, or open the gate and invite chaos into his life. Liana's eyes burned into him, her voice trembling but certain. "I saw you in the dreaming, many times, the lone human who would shelter us when no one else would." Jack's breath faltered. The dreams, she knew. She had been there. This was no accident. No coincidence, against reason. Against his soldier's instinct. Jack felt his hand move. The gate controls hummed beneath his touch. The massive doors began to slide open with a metallic groan. Wind and sand rushed in, the storm clawing at the threshold. The 11 figures pushed forward, graceful even in exhaustion, eyes glowing in the dim light. Jack shouted over the storm, Get inside quickly before the winds tear you apart. They hurried through, their violet skin glowing faintly under the artificial lights of his compound. As the last one entered, Jack slammed the gate shut. The thunder of the storm sealed outside. For the first time in 15 years, Jack was no longer alone. And deep inside, he knew his exile was over. What stood inside his walls now would change everything. Dream bonds and dangerous truths. The storm outside raged like a living beast, but inside the compound the air was heavier, thicker, almost electric. Jack stood in the entry chamber, his pulse rifle still tight in his hands, staring at the 11 alien women who now filled his once silent fortress. Their eyes glowed like fire in the dim light, their skin marked with patterns that shifted slowly, like ripples across water. The silence between them was louder than the storm. Liana stepped forward, her white hair tangled from the desert winds, her violet skin glowing faintly. She bowed her head slightly, not in weakness, but in something closer to respect. "We thank you, human man," her voice echoed, strange and melodic, carrying an accent that bent human words into something new. Jack's voice came out rough, sharp. "Name's Jack Harmon." The other women whispered his name softly, as though testing it, as though they had already known it. Jack felt his chest tighten, suspicion growing like fire. "How do you know me?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the chamber like steel. Liana's eyes held his without flinching, her words slow, deliberate. "Because I saw you before. Not here, not now, but in the dreaming." Jack felt his breath falter. The dreams. He had never told anyone, not in 15 years because there was no one left to tell. Yet she spoke of them as though she had been inside his mind, walking the same endless visions that had haunted his nights. A cliff above an ocean, a woman with white hair, eyes like lightning, a voice whispering his name. He shook his head, forcing the thought away. Dreams don't mean anything, they're just tricks of the brain. But even as he said it, he knew it was a lie. Liana stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his, her voice soft but certain. "Proxians are born with dream sight, some more than others. We see fragments, shadows of what may come. But with you, it was not shadow. It was clear. You and I were meant to meet." Jack gripped his rifle harder, torn between fear and an emotion he refused to name. "Why here?" he growled. "Why me?" Liana's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "Because you were alone. Because you were waiting, though you would not admit it. Because the dreaming chose you." The other women stood silent, their faces unreadable, their glowing patterns pulsing with slow rhythm. Jack's instincts screamed this was dangerous, that he should throw them out before the syndicate patrols arrived, before their presence turned his fortress into a target. But another part of him, deeper and older, whispered that turning them away was impossible. His exile had been built on walls, and now those walls were cracking. Hours passed as Jack gave them water, food, and space to rest. His compound, once empty and cold, now felt alive. Footsteps in the halls, quiet voices filling the silence he had once cherished. But that night, when Jack finally closed his eyes, the real strangeness began. He dreamed again. But this dream was not the broken fragments he had suffered for months. This time he stood on a cliff, the sea crashing below, and beside him was Liana, her hand brushing his, her voice in his mind without words. He turned, and she was looking at him, not like a stranger, but like someone who already knew his soul. Jack woke with a gasp, sweat cold on his skin. It felt too real, too sharp, as though the dream had not ended. He rubbed his eyes, muttering to himself, "It's nothing, just the brain, just tricks." But when he walked into the kitchen, Liana was already there, standing by the window watching the rising suns. She turned as if expecting him and said softly, "You dreamt of me again, didn't you?" Jack froze, his hand tightening around the mug he carried. "How the hell do you know that?" he demanded. Liana's blue eyes glowed faintly, her patterns shifting across her skin like flowing ink. "Because I was there. Because we shared the same dream." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Jack wanted to laugh, to deny it. But the truth pressed against him like a weight he could not escape. "That's impossible," he muttered. Liana stepped closer, her voice steady. "Not impossible, only rare. When two souls connect across distance, the dreaming binds them. Few Proxians ever feel it. But with you, it is stronger than anything I have known." Jack stared at her, his soldier's heart pounding against his chest, his instincts torn. Was this destiny, or was this a trap dressed in beauty and mystery? He wanted to push her away, but when their fingers brushed as he handed her coffee, a jolt like lightning shot through him. His breath caught, his mind flooded with flashes not his own. Images of cities built from crystal, forests of silver trees, laughter beneath 3 alien moons. He stumbled back, eyes wide. What the hell was that? Liana's voice was calm, but her patterns pulsed brightly. "That was me, my memory. You felt it because the bond is real." Jack's world, once built on silence and certainty, was collapsing. 15 years of solitude, shattered by 11 widows and one woman who spoke of dreams as if they were truth. He had locked himself away from the universe, and now the universe had found a door into his soul. And outside, in the endless desert, the syndicate patrols were already hunting. Time was running out, and Jack knew his exile had turned into something far more dangerous. The dreaming was not just connection, it was a warning, and soon the truth would demand a price. The widow's new home for 15 years. Jack's compound had been a silent fortress. Now it echoed with voices, footsteps, and the unfamiliar sound of laughter. 11 alien widows had turned his exile into something else, something Jack could not yet name. At first he hated the noise. Every corner that once held only silence now carried whispers in a language not his own, or the soft melody of their voices practicing human words. Jack told himself he wanted them gone, told himself he only opened the gate because the storm would have killed them otherwise. But when he walked the halls and saw light spilling from rooms that had been empty for years, something inside him stirred, something he had buried long ago. The women did not act like guests nor like helpless refugees. They moved through the compound with purpose, as if survival was a habit they carried in their bones. One by one they claimed forgotten spaces, turning cold storage rooms into sleeping quarters, clearing dust from chambers Jack had not entered in a decade. Soon, the lifeless outpost began to change. Mora, the youngest, crouched over his broken tools with quick hands, repairing circuits with violet fingers steady as a surgeon's. When Jack asked her where she had learned, she only smiled faintly and said, "On my homeworld, I was an engineer before the war." Neela and Talia disappeared into the hydroponic garden, returning hours later with strange desert tubers that grew even in the dry soil. By nightfall, his meager greenhouse glowed brighter, filled with plants he had never seen. Jack watched all of this with a soldier's suspicion. Every change they made to his compound felt like they were pulling it away from him. But when he stepped back, when he looked honestly, he saw that they were not dismantling his fortress. They were giving it life. Liana, always at the center, moved with calm authority. Her voice carried weight when she gave directions. Yet her presence near Jack was different, gentler. They spoke more often now, sometimes about repairs, sometimes about Earth, sometimes about the strange dreams that bound them. Every time she looked at him, Jack felt that same electric pull, the bond he tried to deny. But with every passing day, unease grew. Jack knew too well that nothing in war came without a cost. He watched them with sharp eyes, wondering if their skills, their unity, their sudden presence in his life was more than accident. And in the quiet hours, when he slept, the dreams returned stronger. In one dream, he saw himself dancing with Liana under 3 moons. In another, he saw their hands joined over a child's cradle, a child with eyes both blue and violet. He woke drenched in sweat, whispering curses, his soldier's heart screaming this was wrong, too fast, too dangerous. But when he stepped into the kitchen at dawn and found Liana waiting by the window with a cup of bitter coffee in her hands, it felt natural, as though she had always belonged there. Shadows on the horizon, the widows had turned Jack's compound from a hollow fortress into a living place. But peace was fragile, and Jack knew it. Every instinct whispered that the storm outside was only waiting for its moment to break through. His gates one morning, while helping Mora repair an old power line, Jack stumbled on something buried in the eastern storage bay, a massive machine covered in dust and forgotten crates. When Mora brushed the panels clean, his stomach dropped. It was a long-range communication array, military grade, a relic from the outpost's earliest days, and Jack remembered how he had ripped its power couplings out 15 years ago, swearing he would never let Earth or anyone else find him again. Now the widows stood around it, their violet eyes glowing in the half-dark. Neela ran her fingers across the panel, whispering. This could be repaired. Jack's chest tightened. The array was not just a machine. It was a bridge. A bridge to politics, war, and every shadow he had fled from. Liana stepped closer, her voice low but steady. We cannot remain hidden forever. The Syndicate hunts us. Sooner or later they will find this place. We need allies. Jack snapped back. Allies bring attention. Attention brings fire. His words were harsh, but even as he said them, he saw her eyes. Calm, certain, unafraid. She placed her hand on the dusty machine. Dreams guided us here, Jack. Maybe the array is part of that path. For 2 days he fought the thought. He told himself the widows could not dictate his survival. But at night the dreams pulled him deeper. He saw Liana reaching for him through fire, saw voices from far away calling his name. When he woke, sweat soaking his shirt, he knew the truth. The array had to be restored. Mora worked with steady hands, connecting wires, replacing cells, while Jack stood over her, torn between dread and duty. Finally, the array hummed to life, lights flickering across its panels like the heartbeat of something waking from long sleep. The air grew heavy in the chamber, the widows gathering around, waiting for his word. Jack's finger hovered over the transmission switch. For 15 years he had been silent. Now one signal would break that silence forever. His voice was low, rough. We keep it vague. No mention of you. No mention of this. Place only a call for dialogue. Liana nodded. Her hand brushing his shoulder, grounding him, Jack pressed the button. The array beamed its pulse into the void, a signal stretching across the dunes and into the stars. For a moment, nothing happened. Only static. Then, 2 responses came back, almost at the same time. The first was human, a voice Jack never expected to hear again. Jack Harmon, 15 years of silence, and now you resurface. This is Commander Reed of New Hope Settlement. The Council wishes to send an envoy to your coordinates. Matters of mutual concern to discuss. The second message was encrypted. Proxian, military code. Neela's hands flying as she broke it. Her eyes widened, her voice grim. Survivors confirmed. Resistance continues. Syndicate forces moving south through your sector. Reinforcements impossible. Trust no one outside your circle. The chamber went silent. 2 messages. One offering diplomacy, the other warning of death. Jack's gut twisted. Reed had once been his comrade, a man he respected, but 15 years could change anyone. And the Alliance's message carried desperation, almost fear. Liana's voice cut through the silence, soft but sharp. This is no accident. 2 answers in one night. The dreaming has placed us here. Jack wanted to laugh, wanted to curse, but his soldier's instincts told him she was right. This was the turning point, the shadow before the storm. That night the dreams grew darker. Jack saw Syndicate banners burning above his compound, saw Reed's face half hidden in smoke, saw Liana clutching his hand as the world shook. Apart, when he woke, the proximity alarm screamed. This time it was no dream. Mora's voice came through the comms, sharp with fear. Movement on the western ridge, 6 signatures, not alliance patterns. Jack rushed to the control station, his eyes narrowing at the display. 6 Syndicate scout vehicles closing in 20 minutes out. The alarm blared, the compound alive with activity. For years, Jack had lived in silence. Now his fortress was preparing for war. The widows moved like soldiers, reborn, each one falling into tasks without hesitation. Mora sealed the comms room. Neela and Talia secured the array. Cora led 3 others to the bunker. Liana joined Jack at the monitoring station. Her presence steady. Jack gave orders like the soldier he had once been. His voice calm, his hands firm. But inside his chest burned. The shadows he had fled were here, pressing against his gates. And this time he was not alone. This time what he stood to lose was greater than anything he had left behind. War comes to the ranch. The desert night glowed faintly with the light of 2 moons. Inside the compound, alarms pulsed red across the walls, a warning that could not be ignored. 6 syndicate scout vehicles crawled toward the ridge, their engines low but hungry. Jack stood at the control station, his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the display. He had lived 15 years preparing for nothing. Now he realized he had been preparing for this moment. Hidden turrets powered on with mechanical growls, shield generators hummed to life. Old systems, Jack once thought pointless, now breathed again like beasts awakening. The widows moved like soldiers, not refugees. Mora and Neela sealed the comms chamber. Hands moving across panels with swift precision, Talia and Ka dragged heavy crates to reinforce the outer gate. Cora organized the rest into teams, her calm voice steady in the chaos. And Liana stood at Jack's side, her eyes glowing like storm. Fire. They're scanning us, Mora reported, her voice clipped. They know we're armed. Jack grunted. Let them see, that's the point. The comm channel suddenly buzzed, harsh and cold. A voice cut through. Accented standard human outpost. This is Commander Vex of the Syndicate. Surrender the widows of the Alliance or face elimination. Jack exchanged a glance with Liana. Her expression was stone, her patterns glowing a defiant blue. Jack pressed. The comm, his voice calm but edged like steel. This compound is a neutral human settlement under interstellar law. Any aggression will be reported to Earth authorities. A cruel laugh answered. Earth is months away, human. You have 10 minutes to comply. After that, we break your walls and take what we came for. The comm cut. Silence pressing in like a blade. Jack turned to the widows, his soldiers' tone firm. They're bluffing. 6 scouts don't have the firepower to breach this fortress, but they're waiting for reinforcements. That gives us time. Liana's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the weight of truth. Unless Reed comes. Unless he proves worthy of your trust. As if on cue, the array pinged. Nyla's voice sharp. Incoming message from the east. Human transports and Alliance fighters moving fast. 15 minutes out, the room filled with disbelief, Cora whispered. Impossible. The Alliance fleet was broken months ago, but the display didn't lie. Human convoys and Proxian fighters cutting across the dunes, closing in. Jack's chest burned with a strange mix of dread and hope. The ranch that had once been his prison was about to become the meeting ground of 3 powers. Humans, Alliance, and Syndicate. A single wrong move, and the desert would drown in blood. The Syndicate made their move first. Explosions cracked the night as their scouts fired warning shots, plasma blasts striking the outer shields with blinding sparks. The walls trembled but held. Jack barked orders, his old military self rising from the ashes. Mora, reroute power to the western turrets. Talia, keep the shield cores stable. Liana, with me. They ran to the west wall, the sound of energy fire echoing across the compound. Through the viewport, Jack saw the Syndicate soldiers, Proxians like the widows, but darker, harsher, their patterns jagged and cruel. They moved with trained precision, circling like predators, testing for weakness. Jack raised his rifle, old instincts flowing like blood in his veins. He hadn't fired in years, but when he squeezed the trigger, the shot was clean. One Syndicate soldier fell, sparks exploding from his armor. The widows beside him opened fire with scavenged weapons, moving in perfect formation. The compound was alive with battle, silence shattered by thunder and flame. Inside the storm of fire, Jack felt something strange, a pulse in his mind, a voice that wasn't his. Liana's voice, sharp and steady. Left ridge, 3 more, shield weak at Sector 9. He turned, fired, and dropped another target before he even thought. He looked at her, eyes wide. You're in my head. She nodded, patterns glowing bright. The bond is stronger in battle. You see what I see. You feel what I feel. The realization shook him, but there was no time to question. The scouts pressed harder, their fire cracking the shields, the gate groaning under stress. Jack shouted over the comms, "Hold the line! 15 minutes, we just need 15 minutes." Minutes stretched like hours. Sparks rained down. Alarm screamed. Heat from the turrets burned the air. The widows fought with a ferocity that stunned Jack, every movement sharp, every strike precise. They were not victims, not helpless. They were warriors who had lost everything but their will. Then through the smoke, light split the horizon. Engines roared, shaking the desert. Human transports thundered across the dunes. Alliance fighters cutting through syndicate lines with burning trails of fire. The scouts scattered, their formation breaking under the sudden force. A voice came through the comm, strong and steady. "Harmon, this is Commander Reed. Hold position, we've got your flank." Jack exhaled, his grip tight on his rifle. The battle was not won, but the tide had turned. The compound shuddered as the last syndicate vehicle exploded under crossfire, flames licking the night sky. The widows lowered their weapons slowly, their breathing heavy but steady. Jack stood in the wreckage of smoke and fire, his chest heaving. For 15 years he had lived like a ghost. Tonight he was a soldier again. But as the horizon lit with human and alliance banners, Jack knew the hardest battle was yet to come, because survival was no longer just his own. It belonged to everyone inside these walls. And now the ranch had become more than a home. It had become a spark that could ignite a war far larger than any he had ever run from. From solitude to harmony. 1 year had passed since the night the syndicate scouts attacked the ranch. The dunes of Proxima B7 still stretched wide and endless. But the silence that once ruled them was gone. Where Jack once stood alone, now a settlement thrived. Metal and stone structures rose beside the old compound. Irrigation channels cut through the sand, and voices filled the air day and night. They called it Harmony Ranch. It was no longer just a fortress, no longer just Jack's prison. It had become a refuge for both humans and Proxians. Families worked the fields, children played among hydroponic gardens, and laughter carried through halls that once echoed only with wind. Jack stood on his observation deck, the same place where he had once stared into emptiness. Now he watched farmers tend green fields, engineers weld new towers, soldiers training side by side with Proxian widows. His chest tightened as he realized the truth. The man who had chosen exile had somehow become the center of something larger than himself. Leanna joined him, her white hair braided with desert flowers, her violet patterns glowing in the morning light. She slipped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his shoulder. Jack's hand covered hers without thought. "Admiring your handiwork," she teased gently. Jack's rough voice answered, "Our handiwork." Harmony Ranch was more than survival. It was proof. Proof that humans and Proxians could build something together, not just fight wars and bury the dead. The dream bond that had connected Jack and Leanna had spread. Others reported the same shared visions. Humans and Proxians linked in ways science could not explain. Together, these bonds had revealed syndicate strongholds, enemy movements, secrets no spy could gather. It had become their greatest weapon, a weapon built not from guns but from trust. Still, shadows lingered. The syndicate had not fallen. They regrouped, waiting for a chance to strike. Earth, too, had begun to watch closely, sending volunteers. Doctors, engineers, and soldiers. Politics stirred like sand under the desert wind. To some, Harmony Ranch was hope. To others, it was a threat. That evening, Jack and Leanna walked through the central courtyard. Lanterns glowed softly, illuminating stone paths and woven banners of both human and Proxian design, the original. 11 widows moved among the crowd, each now leaders in their own right. Mora had founded a technology hub, training young engineers. Neela and Talia oversaw vast gardens that fed hundreds. Cora served as healer, her knowledge blending medicine. From two worlds, Jack felt a strange warmth in his chest as he watched them. What had begun with desperation at his gate had become a family that carried scars but also dreams. That night, Leanna took his hand and placed it gently against her abdomen. Her patterns glowed bright with joy, her eyes shimmering. The first child of human and Proxian bond, she whispered. Jack's throat tightened, his rough soldier's voice breaking. We're going to be parents. The truth of it sank deeper than any battle. For 15 years he had believed he was finished, a man running from life itself. Now, life was growing inside their bond. The news spread quickly, and the entire settlement gathered. Reed, the human commander, raised his glass. To new beginnings, General Terrace of the Alliance added solemnly, and to the dreams that brought us here. The people cheered, their voices rising like a storm. But this storm was not of destruction, it was of hope. Later, under the 3 moons, Jack and Leanna returned to the deck where his exile had begun. The desert stretched wide as always, but it no longer felt empty. Leanna's voice was soft, thoughtful. Do you ever regret it opening the gate that night? Jack turned to her, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. I spent 15 years believing solitude was safety. Then 11 stubborn women proved me wrong. He cupped her face, his voice steady. How could I regret finding everything I never knew I wanted? Their lips met, their bond flared bright, their minds entwined as one. In that moment, Jack Harmon was no longer a soldier running from war, no longer a ghost hiding from his past. He was a man, a father, a leader, bound to a new people and a new future. At dawn, the suns rose over Harmony Ranch, lighting towers, gardens, and homes with golden fire. The ranch was no longer a fortress of exile. It was the heart of something new, and Jack knew the truth at last. He had not just survived, he had begun again,